Okay, good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? My name is Peter Igaga, and I will be your host today. Some people like to call it moderator, and all those are funny things, but I'd rather say I am going to be your host. Um, I want to welcome you here on behalf of Uganda Advertisers Association, and we are going to have an extremely intense and great chat with a gentleman who knows no boundaries. Now, he happens to be a good friend of mine, kind of, because sometimes because of the things that he says, I can't really call him a friend, but hey, it is what it is. You don't choose you choose your friends, but you don't choose your enemies. So he happens to oscillate between being a friend and an enemy. I'm talking about Colin Asiimwe. Now, Colin happens to be in a very unique position because today we're going to be talking about how the agency and the client can basically get the best out of each other. Because it's no secret, it is a very interesting relationship. But before I get to that, I think it's important for us to put into context who Colin is. Now, Colin, he's a seasoned chap. He's been around, and when I say been around, I don't mean like been around, but he has worked in on both the agency side and the client side, having been worked at Hill and Norton, Scanned. He's worked at Starleo, WPP Scan Group, QG Group, Tonic International, Metropolitan Republic, and he has even had a chance to work in outside countries. Well, not that far, just here in Kenya, at YNR Kenya. He currently holds the position of the head of marketing at MultiChoice Uganda. So he's got a wealth of experience and a wealth to share. Now, this is going to be more of an interaction chat. So I want to welcome Colin to this event. Colin, you're welcome.
Good morning, Peter. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to be speaking to yourself. I mean, seeing as we're old frenemies and all, and the wider advertising community in Uganda. It's such a pleasure.
Cool. Great to have you here. Now, yes. Colin, we're going to dive straight into it. And I'm just going to start with the hard stones. Now,
the hard stones.
You see, it's no secret that the relationship between the agency and the client in a lot of times is a very, for lack of a better term, acrimonious one. First of all, it is a necessary relationship. The client needs the agency to get the work done. The agency needs the client to live the business. But often there's always so much friction. There are very few relationships where that are just smooth flowing. Sometimes when you talk to the agency is like, oh, the client is a mess. They're not honest. They don't seem to know what they want and all that stuff. Then when you talk to the client, these guys are just lazy excuses. They tell lies. Now, you've been on both sides. You know the lies that the agencies tell, and you also know how unrealistic
the lies that clients tell.
The lies clients tell.
We need it next week.
Yet the guy, the brief, 2 months ago had forgotten about it. His or her boss asks, "Are we good for next week?" And they're like, "Yes, we are." Then throw the fire to the agency. Now, just this marriage is a necessary marriage. First and foremost, can it work? Or should clients start looking at having in-house agencies? Over to you.
So thank you very much, Peter. I just want to, I feel like in a lot of places we've been in, sometimes we end up in bad marriages. Or no, not we end up in bad marriages. I think that for a lot of cases, people have only seen one type of client-agency relationship. And that's the one where the client, is where the agency is at the mercy of the client's business, because the client has money, agency has resources, the agency is trying to maximize the number of resources that they have and the number of people they have. The danger with that is it creates a unidimensional view of that relationship. It creates a very dangerous precedent and paradigm for people thinking, oh, we must find a way. The client is difficult, but we must find it. But the truth is, and I wanted to start off by saying, those of you who know, so consider the most creatively awarded agency in the world, and consider the #1 agency for any client to work with. There's an agency out of the US called Droga 5. And at the end of every year, when I first heard this, it just blew my mind. At the end of every year, the clients at Droga 5 come back in and pitch to the agency why they should remain as clients in the business. They say, this is what we promised when you gave us a contract last year. This is how many ideas you gave us. This is how many we executed. This is the effectiveness. And what's scary about that is all of a sudden, if you're at the top of the pyramid, and we know a couple of other agencies, there's some agencies out of London, there's some agencies, I think, as well in South Africa that sort of have this model, this paradigm. And then you start to realize that the reason why we suffer is there isn't a lot of faithfulness and there isn't a lot of trust in these relationships. Because if you're at the top of your field as an agency, the client will say, listen, don't check us out, don't throw us out. Let's try and see if we can work together on ideas. But the reverse is also true, which tends to be the case for a lot of us. At the end of the year, the agency is saying the contracts are up for renewal. Please don't flash us. Let's see how we can work together. We can improve certain things. So, can the relationship work? I believe quite strongly, Peter, that these relationships do work, and they work based on a couple of things. Just really quickly to highlight them off. So, there is a very big element of trust. And when you say trust, you mean trust in the same mission and in the same vision, that the agency understands where the client's trying to take the business, but the client also understands where the agency is trying to grow into. Why? Because certain times you take agencies, when you're a middle-sized client, you're trying to grow your business, you're trying to grow, you pick a small-size agency and you say, let's grow together. As your business grows, your agency grows with you. And those have been found to be the slightly stronger relationships because they are tied into each other's growth. So the agency will give some leeway and the client will also make some leeway. But that compromise, that those elements of the partnership are key to ensuring that is a success and is an ongoing success. But trust is also about the mission. And so the vision is the destination, but the mission is how we get there. And when you think about that, it means that you're literally naked in bed together with these people. They know your stuff. You're occasionally going to do some down and dirty stuff for them. That's the mission. That's the how to. And I think that's important because sometimes you're going to find some shady clients. And I'm not saying all clients are shady. I'm saying there's going to be some shady clients and their values are not going to be able to align with your agency values, where you come from. You say, we run a kind of business like this. I'm sorry, what you're asking us to do is something we cannot do. I mean, that happens more often than not. So you think about it in terms of, oh, we're trying to, do some big fraud stuff. But sometimes it's not that. It's the client saying, can we put my niece in the ad? And you're just like, yeah, but like that's going to be a problem with, where the work is going to sit. And so it's simple things like that and that's healthy because agreeing on the mission, agreeing on how we will get to this destination, I think is also paramount in part of building this process. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about is that trust in the formats. And the trust in the formats is important for you, both on the client side and on the agency side, because what the formats allow you to do means that at the start of the relationship or whenever you get together, you agree that this is how our briefing formats are going to look like. So not someone coming 6 months in and saying, okay, we have a new briefing template, but you haven't taken the agency through it. You've sent the brief. It's last 3 weeks because someone's trying to understand what the new briefing template is. And those things, they're simple, they're hygiene things, but they're so important in growing that, because we're always trying to optimize that time between briefing and when the work comes out and when we deliver to market. And I've found that working with agencies having been on the agency side, on the strategy side, and having done account management work as well, that optimizing that time, ensuring that the input tools, which is your briefing or your research, whatever that is, making sure that it's aligned with where your goals are and both of yourselves and both of your teams, and ensuring also that your measures of success are aligned. So that the agency isn't saying, oh my God, everyone is talking about the campaign, but the client is saying, but it was a brand uptake campaign. It was an acquisition brief. You know, everyone's talking about it, but no one's buying. And being conscious of those things, the things that are important to each other, I think that's very, very critical. The second thing I wanted to just quickly touch into is competence. And competence is, it's so I think that competence takes a couple of facets. One of those is capabilities, and in capabilities, you want to talk about skills and you want to talk about teams. Skills is the kind of people you have on your team as the agency, but also skills is the kind of people is kind of clients you have in your agency. So some of you have amateur clients who are in great positions because their bosses left and then they had to step into a big role. They are not ready, they are half-baked, they don't know. And so you have to take the position to lead them. And what that does is occasionally they're going to get under pressure and then they're going to react badly. You need someone who's strong enough to lead them without making them feel childish, because they will eventually grow. They will eventually become the right, come into their own once they develop the skills. At the moment when they're growing, it is important to sort of shape them and understand that they may be a victim of circumstance. They're in the right place at the right time, but they don't have the right marketing skills. And I think that that's important. So there is a job for the agency to lead there. But also conversely, you have situations where your agency team isn't fully baked. So maybe you have a creative director, but they're athletes. So you struggle sometimes on radio scripts or radio ideas or script ideas. And I think that kind of being vulnerable to that then allows you as the client sort of say, guys, you know, and to be strong enough to say, you know, we aren't there yet. And we're aware that we aren't there because we know that there are skills gaps. I think that honesty allows you to fill the gaps where they exist, and also to lead wherever. It's not that the client will always lead. There are situations where you find yourselves with the agency leading and saying, listen, we're going to take care of this. This is where it is. We're going to take care of this, and we'll come back to you if we need any feedback. And that's fine. And that's all there is to that. And I think that display of leadership is something that then reinforces what we're talking about in terms of trust above. When we're saying we are going in the same direction, my partner understands where we're going to go. Right now, I'm swamped with internal processes, but they're going to take care of what we need to take care of and make sure we cross the line. The other part around capability is the teams. So we've spoken about the skills. So you need skills like collaboration. You need skills like leadership. You need skills like proactiveness. You need skills like creativity. Those are the skills that you need to make that work. But you also need the softer side of that relationship, which is empathy, understanding, the ability to reach out and say, hey, yes, because someone's the client doesn't mean that you cannot be able to have a human sort of genuine relationship where you're able to check in on people, know how they are, but also understand what they're going through. The other thing is how teams are resourced. And I've already spoken into that. Willingness. Go out there, the willingness to do big, all part of competence. I think that it allows the agency to, what we found is that it allows us to be able to say, what can we do? What is achievable? And because many clients will tell you there is something in the client world. I never knew this when I was in the agency side. There is the target, which is what is agreed, which is what your marketing client agrees with their boss. And then there is something the marketing client is added by their boss called the stretch target. The stretch target is whatever the target is plus 20%. Many times, the stretch target is what you find in the brief. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to it, but I think that genuinely, you can choose one or the other, but you can't say on this brief I'll put the stretch target, on this brief I'll not put the stretch target. If you choose to put the real target, then always put the real target, because that ensures that everyone is clear. They're on the same page on where we're going, what we need to do. But also it doesn't rob people of their success. There's many times when agencies do really great kick-ass work and the campaign shoot the lights out, absolutely very well performed. But because someone lied to them about what the target was, they feel like they failed. And I think that that's unfair and it's cruel. But it's also a very old mindset, which depicts a lack of transparency and insecurity on the side of marketing teams. So we need to be open about those kinds of things. And then, of course, willingness comes along with that can-do spirit. How can we fix? How do we solve? Things haven't gone right. How do we fix this? The third element, Peter, and I think I'll probably try and see if I can wrap it up quickly, is in this relationship, in the advertising client agency relationship, there's things that are out of our control. What competition does, if the customer has no money, if you're in a marketing position now, if you're in an agency position, you know that pushing products this start of the year, right at the start when kids were going back to school, was really difficult, unless you're selling scholastic materials. But for everyone else, it's just been doubly hard. It was hard during the double lockdown of the last 2 years, but it was double hard this January. Now, that's not something that's in your control. That's right. Things like macroeconomic factors, those things will never be in your control. However, from time to time, always, there are things that are in your control. And I call these things the discipline factors. The discipline factors are the things that you control as the agency, as the people who are in this relationship. And they are simple things. They are daily things. They are things like ensuring that your briefs come on time. Because when you sat down at the start of the year and say, all tier 1 briefs require a 2-week notice period or a 3-week notice period, but if we then do the briefs, these are the steps that we've agreed. So the discipline things are the things that are in your control. Listen, we had an emergency, the agency has shut down. You were expecting some work. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to lie to you that someone's going to work on it this evening. No, it's not going to happen. Can we look at this at first half tomorrow? That honesty, the discipline to say, this is what's happening. How can we manage it? And how do we, get into a space of mutual happiness? The other thing is things like, your reports, making sure your reports come in on time. Those are things that are discipline-based. You have full control of what happens. So your briefs, your reports, your campaigns, ensuring that you work to ensure they come out on time. And the other thing around this is contracting. A lot of situations, a lot of times you find people end up in situations where they're working out of contract and someone says, but don't upset the client. But really what you're doing is exposing your business to failure. And you're in this business because remember that the agency isn't just the people who work on your account. There's a whole multitude of people who in the back end, office admin, who sort of take care of that business. And by you not taking care of the simple things like contracting, it threatens whatever goal you're trying to chase. Because if the agency goes out of business because you want diligent or you want fastidious enough around your contracting, I think that's not good business. It's foolhardy, I think, even. And so thinking about that, when I take that view, I think that, so in your discipline, you have your simple things, your daily things, your briefs, your contracting, your brief formats. And then, of course, there's the thing about boundaries. I know that some of you have heard that the Parliament is discussing a new bill where they're going to sort of do like France and say people cannot be contacted after working hours. And I think that boundaries are very important. You have to understand that people who do your work, and this is the clients, the people who do your work on the agency side have lives. They get married, they have kids, they have personal emergencies, and from time to time, they will not always be available. There is an acceptable stop time for when you can contact them, reach out to them, ask them for work. And that's, I think that's a painful thing for me to say, because one, sometimes I'm also all there at 7:30, like, by the way, you promised me this work, where is it? But I'm aware that creating healthy boundaries strengthens the relationship. So people know they can rely on you to sort of be professional about the work that you're doing. Why? Because you won't always be the account manager. You won't always be the client. There are many times when clients have switched and gone into account management positions or agency positions, but also there are times when agency people have moved into client positions, and then they realize that the lack of boundaries hurts everyone. And so I think that it's important to sort of fix those things. What are the three things that will make these relationships not work, Peter? I think that number one is ego. Ego is the enemy. Ego is the enemy, and I think that that's critical to understand. The ego is when you don't lead with the brand, is when you don't lead with the customer, is when you don't lead with the relationship, but you lead with what you want because you're in a position of influence and power. And I always use this number one example about there's a guy in the industry. He goes by the name well, I don't know if that's right, but so years ago, I was an account manager. I was a business director at Tonic International. We were doing some work for Christmas. It was the 24th of December, and we'd given him some options on some layouts. And it was 7 p.m. and I was saying, I need to release the team. I need them to go. And he said, no, make sure you do this. And I said to him, listen, we've given you the options. The producers, the production guys aren't going to be able to produce the flyers anyway. All this other stuff is going to happen on the 27th. And I remember this gentleman standing up, looking up to me and saying, I am the client. You will do what I want. I pay you. And it was insightful at the moment and hurtful. But I realized then at that moment that he was leading with where he came from, who he felt he was in that moment. Life and time cycled around. A couple of years later, we ended up in the same place. And I remember thinking, that thing that you said is not something that I can ever forgive you for. But then I realized that he was saying it from a position of youth and power, growing into the role and where life has taken us. Now I see that possibly if I'd been his age, I probably would have said the same things. But I say that to say, always be aware that it is just a chair where you sit. And there's a warning to clients, you have to always be careful. It's a chair. The same person who sits there tomorrow will get the same respect. They'll get the same difference that you're getting today. So it's not about you. You're not special. You're only special because of the chair where you're sitting. Number two is you have to always be aware about foreigners. And I don't mean foreigners. I mean, there's a very strong idea. There was a time when the industry had this idea that it was really great to get, white creative directors or sort of get world-class people to come and do Ugandan work. But Uganda has always been the most treacherous terrain in getting work out. Why? But because Uganda is very complex, and all of you in this room know this. You know that we have 55 tribes, we've got 52 languages. You know that if you don't get it, you don't get it. There are things that if you're not in Uganda and you don't live here, there are certain nuances that you'll miss all the time, every time. And so your work is always going to be off brief and not connecting with audiences. Being aware that we're a young nation, therefore we're fleeting and we generally don't hold on to things. And if you're in the news today, in 48 hours, you'll have cycled out and someone else will be on the front headline, means that you have to be aware about being proactive, being fast, being quick to execute. Because if you miss it, then you're going to be doing things, right after or long after the moment has passed. And then the final thing around this, again, I guess, is around hubris. The idea that unlimited budgets can solve problems and therefore allow you to shortcut putting in the real work, I think is a flawed idea. And we've seen that with certain clients who came and left the market because they had a big budget, they tried to do everything and take down the competition and take the whole industry with it. And that generally doesn't work. What we found is that strong relationships, putting in the work, doing the research, understanding your consumers, leading with those things, I think is what delivers lasting and sustainable results for businesses. Thank you, Peter.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Colin. Very, very, very insightful points and a lot of gems there. Now, before we get into the Q&A with everybody else, I just want you to touch on something. You've talked about the client taking lead, the way we need to be very careful. And I say we, speaking from the agency side. But what about the talk of going the extra mile? Everybody talks about going the extra mile. Just, you don't have to necessarily stick to the brief. But funny enough, I do know a certain client who clearly told me that, you see, in our brief, if we have given you A, B, and C, that's all we want. We know why we wanted A, B, and C. If you go do E and F and you didn't do A and you only did B and C, I'm going to have a big problem with you, despite the fact that you did E and F. So where do we stop where going the extra mile is concerned? Or do we just stick to the brief, understand it from the beginning, say these are the objectives, and be mechanical about it?
Okay. So that's a very interesting question, Peter. What I've I think it also comes from the spirit of where the relationship is based. In some toxic relationships, you find that you get exactly what you ask for, but that's often it's a mechanical way to operate the relationship. It's also highly efficient, but I've also found, and I've had the chance to work, when you work at the top end of this work, you start to find that the best agencies have the chance to clarify the brief. And if it's in the brief, do that. Don't do more than what's in the brief. Why? Because the agencies that are really good don't have the time. They don't have the time to do extra stuff. They are able to give you extra thoughts. They're able to come back with what you call a provocation. You know, hey, the brief wanted A, B, C, D, but we are putting one slide with 3 ideas on how we could extend, which is E, F, and G. That way, there isn't extra time wasted on things which the client doesn't want or will most likely not look at. But also, Peter, you have to understand that there's a spectrum for clients. Yeah, some of your clients aren't as smart as you think they are. They sit in these chairs, they take these professional courses, but they don't have the wherewithal to actually think through their briefs. And that's why sometimes I think it's important in that pairing process to find some of your sharpest, your most attention to detail guys, to sort of get them and pair them with some of these people who are airheads, and sort of say, so that they are backstopping the client. They're constantly saying, hey, I think we might have forgotten this. The last time we did these radio ads, we also did some IVR ads. Or when we normally do F5 flyers, we also add, F4 posters. I see you've omitted it here. Is this intentional? And what that does, it builds the confidence of the client. It builds their competence as well with their skills that we were saying earlier. But it also helps the relationship overall. So there isn't a straight answer, but coming back into what you're saying, Peter, I think that there's a strong place for talent pairing and always ensuring that if you confirm the brief to be what it is, then we go ahead and execute on that. There isn't the space or the bandwidth to go the extra mile. People who are going the extra mile are sort of saying that they weren't comfortable with the work they've submitted in the initial brief anyway. Because if you've done what the client has asked and you've done it to the best of your ability, you don't need to give them an extra mile because they're not going to give you an extra retainer.
Cool, thanks, very profound. So in case you joined us while the conversation was going on, you are currently on the canvas itself, where we are designing and drawing, because it's an open canvas. And we are talking to Colin Asiimwe, who is the head of marketing at MultiChoice Uganda. And we are talking about getting the most out of your campaigns with agency support. The key word here is agency support. Now, we're going into that point where we have our Q&A. We want to hear from you guys. If you've got any burning questions, compliments, Colin is all yours. For the ladies who are looking for husbands, he's ready to marry you, so you can also carry him along with you.
What now, Peter?
But we'll start with your your questions first. So anybody who's got a burning question out there who wants to ask Colin, now is the time. Just shoot up your hand and our admin will unmute you and you'll be able to ask your question. The floor is officially open. I can see Paul Mwirigi.
Hi, Colin. Hi, Peter. Good morning, everyone on the call. So, Colin, this one is aside from the topic. Money aside, don't you find client side being boring and you miss agency?
No, Peter. It depends on the brands you're working with. I think so. So being what you call, the hyper extrovert that I am, I think that one of the big challenges that I faced coming into this side was not worrying that I'd get bored. But what I've seen and what I've experienced is that and I'm going to say this with some hesitation, but with a lot of internal conviction. Brands take on the characters of their managers. And so if you're an excited, energetic, high extrovert, your brand becomes like that because that's the energy that you inject into it. That's where you steer it. And I found that sometimes you find exciting brands and what the agency gives you, is a plethora of materials, clients and briefs and information to learn from. I found across my life that when you sit in a social setting and you talk to someone from agency, they know something about everything, but that's because of their work and what they work on and the multiple things that they're exposed to. However, I found that you can also be, you can find pleasure in, the brands that you have and working with them and sort of mining them for depth and how they connect with people's lives. And then on the other thing, Peter, Paul, that you're saying, some of these agency guys are better paid than your clients. They're always getting approached to take these client jobs and they refuse because the client jobs don't pay as well as agency jobs.
Cool, thanks. Just before we get to Humphrey, there's a question from Adona, and the question is, do clients sometimes impede the success of their own campaigns? And if so, please give us an example.
So a very clear and sharp example is there was a while ago, we're actually shooting a commercial with Adonia, and I think this comes from a personal place. So I think what happened is we had a script, we were preparing the script, we're preparing the film, and somewhere along the way, the creative director made a call about a film, how the scenes were arranged, but then that ended up not agreeing with how the film was going to go, and it wasn't in line with how the writer had sort of put it. And when it came down to the judgment call, as the client, I then said, you know what, let's go with the director because I have a lot of faith in them. I think that they can do some good work. And that ended up sort of causing a lot of acrimony between me and the agency and the feeling that I'd sided with the film director as opposed to siding with the agency. But also, I think I took some lessons from that as well for me personally to sort of say, how do we manage our relationships? How do we manage our stakeholders? For me, that was a stakeholder management situation. But I think that in a lot of places, the incompetence of clients, as we've said, they are not immortal, they are not God, they're like you, they're working in these places. Yes, many times they'll have 15, 10 years experience, more than, and I think that's a law of averages. So you have certain clients who are uber experienced, and the general trend tends to be that people are younger in agencies because the entry level is quite young. But thinking about that, the experience is not a mitigator for bad decisions. And so yes, from time to time, clients will take certain decisions based on personal biases, past experience and prejudices. So another classic example is there's certain clients who will never start jobs without an LPO. It's just how it is. or there are certain agencies that won't do those things. And that's because they were burnt before, they did a job without an LPO, the client came back and denied them. But that goes back into what we were talking earlier. There has to be trust. Someone has to be able to say, if this person assures me this, I know that they'll get it done, they'll get the LPO out. But when that experience plays out and that person gets banned, then you end up years later, you end up with someone says, if you haven't received an LPO, I don't care, don't do it, cancel the job. We'd rather not run this campaign if there's not an LPO because they've been banned in the past. And I think that's the lens that you have to approach your clients with, that they have personal prejudices, they have biases, they have leanings, they have proclivities about things that they like. And those things will sometimes play out into the brands. And sometimes those things are strengths and other times they're weaknesses.
Cool, thanks. Humphrey, you have your hand up. You can shoot your question. Okay.
Hello,
Yeah,
hi.
Humphrey.
Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you very loud and clear.
Thanks. My name is Humphrey. I just wanted to share give a compliment on what I think I asked a question to Collins about going the extra mile. And I think from experience, I've learned that going the extra mile actually most of the time works against you. There's a time I was headhunted by an agency in the UK. They were trying to do a magazine in Uganda here through an agency. And I was headhunted to be the editor because I was editor to the New Vision, where I was running a teens magazine called Swag. So I realized that the approach these guys wanted to do to use the to apply on the magazine was not going to sell and you make kids excited to take it or to even have an interest in it. So I gave in ideas considering that I was already running a successful magazine. But it got into argument all the time. We'd get sort of like a back and forth over Skype with the client and the agency and whatnot. And the agency would always, the creative director would always tell me, like, give me a private call and say, guy, just accept what the client is saying. We don't have time. Don't go the extra mile. Just accept what the client is saying. But I was always conflicted because I knew if we took on what the client was saying, it would not help the magazine. So we'd end up just eating free money, but having a product that wouldn't have the impact. So because I still wanted to go the extra mile, I ended up trying to privately email the client and try to explain my way. And the creative director actually got to know about it and he was very furious. So I realized that going the extra mile, yes, you can, I think, but if you realize that there's slight opposition, I think just quit it and just eat your free money and provide what the client wants as per the brief and just move on, because man, it's very tricky. It gets almost political. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks for that, Humphrey. A very interesting way of looking at things. For those who've joined late, we are on the Kanvas and we are talking about how to get the best out of your agency and client relationship. And we've got Colin Asiimwe, who is our current speaker. And Colin, I just wanted to find out if you had something to say about that, and also while you do, okay, so I think somebody's child is very upset in the background. And while you do take that one on, something to think about is we've got another question, because the questions are just flying in at an amazing rate. FMCGs versus slow-moving consumer goods and services. Please speak and compare how to handle both cases. I guess the question is to just give a little bit of weight on handling the difference between handling FMCGs and SMCGs. That's from Emmanuel Sanyu. Over to you, Colin. Okay, Colin seems to be having a bit of an issue with his connection. So as he reconnects. I would just want to say something onto what Humphrey has mentioned. Now, Humphrey, there's a huge danger about just eating the client's money and moving on. The trouble with that is when you do that, your reputation is what goes down the drain. Because what happens with a lot of clients, when the campaign works, as an agency or a partner, you are doing your job and they move on into the sunset. If it doesn't work, they will say it did not work because of you. And then what happens is, because a lot of this work is based on recommendations, it's your reputation, they will not spread a good word about you. And the unfortunate thing about life is somebody who's not happy with your service will tell a minimum of 10 people. Somebody who's really, really happy about your service will tell a maximum of one or maybe two. So it's very important to manage the two and make sure that you're okay. I've seen a question from Sarah Kajingo. And she said her question is, brands take on the personality of their managers, just as Colin has said. And she asks, does this apply to personal brands? Like if I manage the Right Honorable Prime Minister Nabanja, would it take on my persona? Actually, she is the one who will take on your personality. So, and if you ask me, there is a huge opportunity for that to happen. And I think she needs it. So we're a whole bunch of marketers out here. I think there's an opportunity for somebody like our Right Honorable Prime Minister, because you are the one who commands the brand. So it is actually on you to it's actually on you to make sure that you do it. There is another question again from Sarah. Just let me pluck it out. Colin is rejoining the next like half a minute. It says, are agencies in charge of the whole planning process for clients? You've noticed lately some dipstick sampling is never considered. Do agencies still do media scenes and a day in the life of targets? Now, when it comes to the planning process, I think there is a huge challenge between, and it speaks to what Colin was talking about, having a relationship. As an agency, do you have a relationship with your client, and does the client have a relationship with you, such that the moment they are thinking about a campaign, they sit down with you as the agency, roll it out, you thrash out a couple of ideas, and then once that happens, you're able to come up with something that both of you are on the same page about. Now that way, once you do that, you're able to build a campaign that all of you are involved in, and it's not a situation where the client just decides what they want and shoves it down your throat. Colin, welcome back. He's just getting his audio sorted out. So it's important to make sure that you are in that position where both you and your client have a good relationship. The relationship is such that there's a lot of trust, that the client even knows that once they sit down and talk to you about it, a campaign, even in confidence, it's not going to spill out to the competition, because a lot of people are guarding their knowledge and making sure that at least everything is okay. So I hope that answers your question. Sorry, let me just make sure Colin is unmuted.
Hey, Peter, I'm sorry. I had to take a minute to, you know how these things are, the internet things, they just sign you out and then it starts freezing and then it becomes, you know, like when you go to a pitch and then every single time you've dry run the thing, the slides 6 times before you left the office, you get to the client's place, you plug it in the projector and then it starts freezing. Then you want to die. But that's just life.
I've had an experience where plugged in and then the computer starts updating. Windows is updating and says, please don't shut down the computer. Now that's when you...
So, yeah.
Anyway, back to business. We were keeping the conversation going.
Did I miss some questions? Were there some questions that came through that I missed?
Yes, you did. There's
Okay.
one question which I want to throw to you. We've managed to address a few, but one of the questions which I wanted to address to you is there's a question from Emmanuel Sanyu, which says FMCGs versus slow-moving consumer goods and services. Please compare on and speak into handling both. So basically, I think from a client's perspective, the question is what are if you can just maybe name two key differences when it comes to handling a campaign for both.
For FMCG versus what category?
SMCGs, the slow moving commercial goods.
Wow, that's a very technical question. But so listen, this is my experience. So I started out my career in advertising. I started out in PR. I did account management, went into strategy, and then pivoted out into the client side. This is what I've found about FMCGs. What I know that makes them stand out is they thrive on two things. So when there's a couple of things that make them really great, but I think one is speed to market. It's a very big differentiator. At any one time, you could have the same idea as your competition. You could have the same technology or leaps in technology that have advanced your product movement. But the speed between when you get the idea and when you take it to market is the differentiator. Whereas I find that slow moving goods tend to focus on value proposition because they are not very much about flying off the shelf. They're about long-term value propositions. They're about inbuilt, inherent quality. The second thing is your go-to-market design. And I have to say that FMCGs are blinding fast at this, at how they design this. They make sure they have the right touch points. They've done the science, they've done the psychology around, retail planning. When people enter supermarkets, what are they looking for? What are they looking to buy? And if you understand that psychology, you start to see that, you probably have wondered before why at the supermarket counter is where you find your sweets, your chocolates, all the things that cost under 10,000 shillings, because then you can just easily put that back into your basket and then add it onto your bill. And supermarkets do that because they know the psychology of these things. And then they take the things that most people come and need, which is your fridges, and put them in the back of the store. So by the time you go and get milk and yogurt, you've seen a significant part of the store. But that's a function of design. Whereas you find that, slow-moving consumer goods aren't designed to be retail that way. And so if you ask me, what are the two things that differentiate these two products? One is speed to market, and the other one is go-to-market design.
Oh, thanks for that. Now, just one last question before we are going to call Frank Muthusi to wrap up the session. It's from Martha, and she writes, "Hi there, I would like some tips on how to nurture new client relations, more so how to convince previously traditional clients to back digital campaigns and invest in them." You've gone digital, Colin, so big time. So I'm sure this one is right up your alley.
No, it's not up my alley, Peter. I am those clients. I am the previously traditional clients who are refusing to approve digital campaigns. Listen, so new client relationships take as much time as they take. There are certain people who will trust you in one night. You meet them today, you have a drink with them this week, you're fine, you're good, they're in a place of trust. But unfortunately, clients are human beings. And so they come from a past, a place where they've been hurt before, they trusted someone didn't come through for them. And I think that then you have to be mature enough to say the relationship will take as long as it takes, and we'll be here, we'll be consistent. And it's like kind of like how you pick friends, and you put in the time, you put in the effort, you make sure that it works. It's a dance, and sometimes someone's going to do something and then they're going to flip, and then that's not going to work out. But I think that so I think that new clients relationships can be sustained through actions that build trust, that show that we are going in the same direction, we're working on the same vision, we are on the same side, we're looking out for your interests. And then they are reinforced or they are buttressed by the things that we spoke about in competence. So things like capabilities, things like willingness, and their can-do spirit. I think that those things can help a long way in helping in building new client relations. Because also what you don't want to do, and I hate to use the word kamanyiro, but you don't want your new clients to feel like you're trying to overknow them or get too familiar with them too quickly, too soon. Always allow the opportunity for them to bring you into their world and put the full chessboard pieces on the table and say, listen, I know we're doing like this, but we have a small crisis here. Can we help? Can we fix it? Can we solve it? That's one. And then two, I think that was the question, Peter. Oh, the other one was about digital campaigns. I think that if you have a client who's not approving digital campaigns, they are going to lead you and their brands into failure, because if you think about the landscape today, and it would be nice for John Babakam to come in here and correct me. I think we have about 7.5 million smartphones in Uganda. That's a very big statistic. Anyone who doesn't know that news now breaks and lives on social media, and people get 80% of all their information on their phones, and they're saying, but we don't want a healthy mix between digital and other media. They're being traditional, they're being safe, but also that person is probably making other bad decisions alongside this. So people don't make one single bad decision, because the psychology of it is there is a frame, there's something that happened that hurt them. That frame means that they see certain new technologies in a certain way. And you think they're not approving digital budgets, but you don't know that probably inside the business, they're the ones who are fighting digitization of the process, reducing efforts to ensure that we reduce cost to serve. They're the ones who are making sure everything remains analog and backward. So many times it isn't one thing. So you see one thing, but that one thing is an indicator of a much larger issue, which most times is a question of mindset. Because I don't see how, if you say we're going to cut, 20-30% of the radio stations and we're going to move that money to digital, you're not getting that much less exposure anyway on your radio plan. Whereas digital completely amplifies everywhere you want to go, puts you in everyone's phones, and makes you present and live in people's eyeballs.
Okay, very, very, very powerful words. And just as hope you're also going to be less traditional now that we've had this. Colin, it has been great. We still have questions coming in. We're going to have to compile them and forward them to you because of the issue of time. Where I come from, We say time flies when you're having fun. And I know from my side, I've had a lot of fun and a lot of great learning too. One of the key things that I've picked is the fact that it is important for your client to be your friend and for the agency to be the friend of the client, because it's a relationship. You are in it to win it. You're not in it to compete against each other. You actually compound each other. But without trust, it doesn't matter whichever side is not trusting the other, it's going nowhere. And I think we need to realize that relationships are built. You build relationships. They take time. You have to keep working on them. And the relationship between the client and the agency is just that. We have to work on it and we have to build it. As my politician friends say, after speaking for 4 hours, they say, and with those few words, I want to hand over to the chairman of the Uganda Advertisers Association, Mr. Frank Muthisi, to come in and preach to us as we close, because Frank is a practicing pastor in the making. Frank, I hand over to you because this is the Kanvas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter Igaga, for the moderation. Thank you, Collins, for the words of wisdom. I think we've learned a lot. Maybe one thing I want to ask everybody, I know that there are more questions. I've seen more questions in the chat group. Can we take this conversation on Twitter? Keep asking those questions, tag Collins, tag UAA, and let's take that conversation on Twitter, and let's learn from each other. I'm happy we've launched the Kanvas, and I'm also happy to see representatives from PRAO, from UMS in here. I think the Kanvas and the mission for UAA, is just to improve, the advertising industry standards. And we can't do this alone. We have to do this with our clients. We have to do this with our other practices, PR and marketing. So seeing everybody here, I am really, really, really happy. I'm hoping that through these conversations, through these deliberations, we can be able to see more, should I say, commercial success for our clients. And I think agencies live for awards. So I'm also hoping to see that, the agencies that are also represented here, we start competing, from a Uganda, regional, and also international level. I'm hoping to see some agencies here representing Uganda, maybe at the lorries, at the cans. So that's why we're having this thing, and we're pushing the boundaries, and we're having these conversations, because without these conversations, then we will not be able to advance. So with those few remarks, guys, thank you very much. We'll be back next month, every last Wednesday of the month. Every last Wednesday of the month, we shall have the Kanvas, and we have surprise speakers, and we have an amazing lineup coming up. So thank you, everybody, and I wish you guys a lovely, lovely week. All right, cheers.
Frank, just before we go, I want to ask everybody to turn on their cameras so that we can take a selfie, a Zoom selfie. I mean, so awesome. Everybody switch on your camera. I'm going to lead by example, and yeah, let's switch, because that's the only way we'll know that you've been here. I mean, this is the canvas, and yeah, we are painting it the way we want to. So come on, everybody, and I'm going to ask Liz or admin to take the selfie, because in all honesty, I don't know how to do it.
Let me
so
do
Liz. No, not the traditional selfie. She's going to take it get a screenshot or something. Liz, we're waiting for you. So yeah. I think she's been able. But guys, great to see you all here. It's been an amazing talk. I think my Wednesday could not have been better. So from us at Uganda Advertisers Association, we want to say have a good day. God bless. And Colin, thanks for being a rock star. Really do appreciate it. And guys, he's Colin, not Collins. There's no S. Frank, that's to you.
All right, cool.
All right. Cheers, guys. Have a great one, and God bless. Bye.